And we are live. Good morning, everybody. Congratulations. It's Friday. You made it through the week. So happy you could join us here on this lovely day. My name is Bryan Armentrout with the Food Leadership Group, and I'm super excited today to have my friend Maile Gradison on to join us for the chat. How you doing, Maile?
Hey, so good to be with you. Happy Friday.
Absolutely. How's the weather in DC looking?
It is gorgeous. The newscasters said it's 9 out of 10, but I think it's a 10. It's a great day to be staring out the window on Zoom.
Oh yeah. You probably catch me kind of doing this because here in Colorado, same thing. It's like the last couple of days, it's been right around 80 degrees. Absolutely gorgeous, which is usually when we get a big snowstorm coming in. So we'll see what happens. If you're new to the food safety chat, first of all, welcome. We're super excited that you're here. We live stream on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube every Friday at this time. So 8 a.m. Mountain, where I'm at in Colorado, here in the US, and 10 a.m. where Maile's on the East Coast. And with this, what you'll notice if you're new is this is a little different than the normal food safety information you get, in that this isn't a presentation. This isn't PowerPoints and we go through and we have questions and answers at the end. This is a discussion. And I'm really fortunate in my career to have got to know some really amazing experts in food safety, of which Maile from Hogan and Lovells is definitely one of those. So this is a golden opportunity to interact with Maile and interact with the other people on the live stream. So just jump in, and we always enjoy this. So Renee is my assistant. Good to see you this morning, Renee. And he'll help kind of shepherd the conversation if there's additional questions and things of that nature. So let us know where you're at in the comments. We love to know, and I'm always amazed, Maile, people from all over the world, click in for this live stream. And so it just makes it that much more fun. So with that, and I always do this, Maile. So one of the things I want to do is I want to always jump right into the topic. But one of the things we love to do, guys, is Jill, is join Maile and me for a cup of your favorite beverage. Oh, I like your cup. That's cool.
From Potter in Asheville, North Carolina.
Nice.
All places.
Nice. So. I like that.
And I'll tell the group, it's 10 on the East Coast. I held off on my second cup of coffee for this. So that's true commitment to the cause, right?
Austin has joined us here in the Colorado area as well. So Austin runs a media company involved with training. Amazing job. Jill does a lot of consulting on the skill development side of the how to be a good manager within her business. So really happy to see her as well. Karen from West Michigan, nice to see you again. Danny, Yorkshire, UK, nice. Thank you for joining us at the end of your workday. Hopefully this will help round out the week for you. So as Maile and I were preparing for this show, it's like, what's some really good things to talk about in that space, and what's going on out there in the world of food safety? Because things, as we know, right, things are starting to change, right? The mask mandates are coming down. People are like, okay, I'm through with this. Let's kind of start getting back to normal. And that normal piece isn't going to be the same, right? And so I'm going out and working with my clients in my consulting business and kind of bringing them back up to speed. Because in a lot of ways, we've been lulled into a false sense of security over the last couple of years, especially if you're in a manufacturing facility. If you're a quality manager, Maile, life was pretty good, right? FDA wasn't coming to visit. The odds of getting inspected were pretty small. And even if you did, it was going to be remote. So that became the new normal. And guess what? That's going to change very quickly. Before we dive into that too much, though, I wanted to kind of go over something I think is really important for companies to understand, because a lot of times, Maile, when I work with companies, one of the first things I'll ask is, who's your food lawyer? And I will get back a lot of times, more times than I would expect, especially at larger companies. Oh no, we have a lawyer. He deals with contracts and procurement and these type of stuff. And I'm like, no. Who's your food lawyer? Who are you going to call when you have an issue, right? Who's going to be there? Hopefully not on a Friday at 10 p.m., but who's going to be there when you've got questions, when consumers are saying your product made me sick? You have to have that external source. And so I kind of wanted to start off this conversation because you're a partner in Hogan and Lovells, huge law firm for food safety, and I've dealt with you guys for a really long time. So from your perspective, why do people need a food lawyer?
You need a food lawyer because when you're being inspected by FDA, they're actually collecting evidence that can be used in legal proceedings.
Yeah.
So an inspection is checking for your legal compliance with the law. They're not your consultant. It's not a food safety audit. It's not like your SQF or something like that, where they're coming in and checking you against something voluntary. If they find problems and you're out of compliance, you are in breach of the law and it's a legal matter. So that's why lawyers get involved. And there's a lot more involved in dealing effectively with FDA in the inspection context than meets the eye, which you really don't know if you haven't been through it before.
Yeah.
So what you don't know can hurt you. The value that we bring is we've done it before. We've seen so many situations, and there's a lot of tricky decisions you have to make in real time. And working with someone who has been on the ground and been through it and knows how to navigate can save you so much time, energy, effort, money. I'll say though, one of the problems is when you're in a situation you don't already have somebody on your team, it's a whole lot harder for us to be effective and get up to speed when I'm quickly trying to understand who are the players, who's your quality manager, what programs do you have, what's your inspection history, what do you make, what's the layout of your facility, what are your lines, what's your exposure for other products, all of that. You can save a whole lot of time and effort and do things a whole lot more if you meet somebody, put in a couple hours proactively just to build a relationship and then have them on your team. That helps us help you.
Oh, exactly. That is so important. So yeah, if for example, I'm a quality manager and I'm like, well, all right, Bryan's making a good point. I need a food lawyer. And I reach out to you and make that connection and write down your phone number and I don't talk to you for 2 more years. No, that's doesn't work, right? That's not the right way to build that relationship. It needs to be, right? If something happens and the blank hits the fan and I'm like, oh my God, right? I can pick up the phone, call you, and in your mind, you're like, oh, okay, this is Bryan. He's working with this company. Just all those things you rattled off, right? Because in those situations, if you're looking at a potential crisis, you don't have time to go through all that stuff, and your brain's not going to think that, right? You're like Beaker from the Muppets, right? You're running around, in panic mode, and that's an important point too, guys. That that food lawyer, that external source, helps you with, because if you're going through a crisis, and FDA is sitting across the table from you, looking at you like this, and you're in the middle of it. You need an objective source of information outside of that whirlwind to say, whew, okay, Maile, here's what we've got. This is what the FDA is saying. This is the products involved. This is the information from the consumer. Right. You can then go, okay, all right, I understand. Let's take this step by step and let's try and figure things out.
Yeah, a couple thoughts on that. I mean, first, just in terms of establishing a relationship with a food lawyer, I've had clients who are in the middle of a crisis and like, how'd you find me? Well, we Googled and you were the first hit that came up. That's not how you want to find a lawyer in the middle of a crisis. Fortunately, it's been, great to help them, but there's a lot of different approaches and personalities. And, in preparation for this, I Googled food lawyer last night, and a lot of the top hits are people in South Africa, or names for just knowing the space. I don't know who they are. Maybe they're great, but you want to know that you're with someone who you click with.
Yeah.
Who has the same approach and strategy, and just like any other part of your business partners, you want to make sure you sort of feel like teammates.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing too is I feel like when you're in the thick of it, working with FDA, that's not the time to be establishing trust. And so often I see decisions that have already been made where I can sort of comment to myself, oh, if only we didn't involve 2 months, 2 minutes, 2 weeks ago, because I can't undo what's already been done.
Right.
And we're just dealing with the facts as they are. But there's oftentimes you don't know what you don't know, and that's where the pitfalls are. Just to your point.
Yeah, and I think too, it's kind of like you hear these sayings of if you're not a parent, you don't know what it's like until you become one, right? It's the same thing in food safety, right? Until you've been the recall coordinator in a serious class 1 recall, you don't know what it's like, right? You can prepare all you want. You can have the documentation. You can do exercises. Guess what? When the recall hits, it's not going to go that way.
It's a great analogy because I see a couple of names on the chat of people who I know, but I don't hide the fact that I have twins who are now 7. I read every book. I'm super type A. I read every book on twins. You think I was prepared the day they were born? No. But it's the same thing. If you end up with one of these awful situations, where you get a note from FDA and they say, we want to have a call with you this afternoon. CORE, the Coordinated Outbreak Response Team, is going to be on, and you don't even know what that means. That's them telling you that they found a whole genome sequencing map of your product with a food and you've got an outbreak on your hands.
Yeah.
You can read whatever articles you want, but until FDA is coming to you and saying, hey, we found a link. Yeah, exactly. So be prepared early and often.
What people don't realize too, Maile, is that FDA goes through some pretty rigorous training on how to conduct inspections. And in those manuals are things that from a food manufacturing perspective are a little gray. So for example, photography.
I was going to say, yeah. I mean, photos is a great example. If you ask us from a strict legal perspective, they don't have, I'm going to get lawyerly here for a minute, sorry, but they don't have express legal authority to take photos. If push came to shove and they went to court, the courts would have to decide whether it was implied or work through that based on the precedent. But the inspectors have been trained about specific court cases to cite. When they cite them, it sounds very serious. Now, if you actually dig in, those sites aren't directly on point. And we get into a nice battle of the lawyers over it. But it's a dance that sort of has to be orchestrated. If you don't know, you might just let them take photos. And again, that's evidence. Why do we care if they take photos? What's in the background? What else is going on there? That's evidence. And the fact that the picture is worth 1,000 words. I mean, I'll give you an example. This Family Dollar warehouse situation. Yeah. I've just read the publicly available documents. I haven't seen any photos, but I can only imagine.
Yeah. If you're not familiar with that, guys, after this, not now, but afterwards, go to YouTube and Google Family Dollar warehouse. And you'll see the story of the whistleblower who showed what was going on there. Yeah, I think the 483, the form that FDA fills out when they have citations, was 22 pages long with that.
And it was fundamentally, a classic insanitary condition situation. But there was a lot of graphic stuff in there where you can imagine the photo. I didn't see photos in the paper, so I'm assuming FDA didn't take them, but whistleblowers may have. But again, it's just an example of knowing how to deal with it. If FDA wants to swab a line that's not operating, what are you going to do? How are you going to, in real time, are you going to Google who's going to help you through it and figure it out? There's a lot of things also when you work with the agency that are unsaid that you have to be able to read between the lines to understand what they're saying. Their legal authorities are sort of tricky in terms of getting the subtext of what they're asking. So if you have a call and they tell you about a problem and they say, what are you going to do about it? That doesn't mean what you're going to do about it. It means we expect you to conduct a voluntary recall, things like that.
Yeah.
Long way of saying, I much prefer when I know folks and we can help them prepare, what is it? A little bit of time up front goes a long way.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think too, right? So I think for everybody here on the call and listening in on this, right? And again, perfect opportunity to ask Maile questions, so fire away. Is that you guys are probably seeing, right, how we are able to sync our conversation pretty quick because we know each other, right? We've worked together for a long time. We've been together in plants helping to evaluate food safety programs and things like this. We know how these things work. So when we're talking about photography, there's all kinds of things below that too that we're not even mentioning that we understand, which is if you don't have a set photography policy in place that is implemented and executed, FDA has a pretty good case for taking pictures. If FDA is asking for pictures, you got a problem. They are gathering evidence at that point. They're generally not going to go to that we want to take picture stage unless they are going to be moving this up that chain for possible actions against your company, right? So you need to be aware of those things. And even little things, right, where food lawyers can help you to say, if FDA puts something in front of you and says, sign it, don't, right? What is your company policy on that? Because it has been shown in past cases that if you sign off on documentation that FDA is putting in front of you, you may be showing to the court that you agree with what FDA has put in that report, which may not be true. Right?
Yep. Or do you let FDA talk to your line employees when they go to the facility? Can they go up to individual employees and interview them as they go? Understanding how to handle those things up front. Yeah, exactly. It's all evidence. If things go the wrong way, all of that could be used in a true legal proceeding against you. And you don't always hear about these things in the headlines of your mainstream media, but they do happen. They do enforce. They do shut people down. They do seek injunctions. And the other thing I think that is tricky to see. So often companies come to me and they're like, but what's the fine? Like, what's the penalty? And FDA they don't function through fines. That's not their approach. Technically, they have reinspection fees, but they're not actually sending out invoices. So let's put that to the side. The fine is not monetary. It's that once you're under the agency's scrutiny, under the magnifying glass, it takes years to get out of being in that realm of them not trusting you and having stricter concerns about you. And they will apply standards they don't enforce for everybody because they don't trust you.
Right.
And you're not going to be out of that penalty box until they come in and reinspect. Is that going to happen in 2 months? No, it might be 2 or more years. Your goal, because they know how this works, is to have you fix it, have you demonstrate that you fix it, give them full documentation of everything, and then give you enough time to screw up again. And have employee turnover, have your plant manager leave, move on to your next problem, open a new plant and get distracted, whatever it is. And then they're going to come back in and reinspect. They're savvy. And you're not going to be off of their target list until you pass that next inspection.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, to use an analogy, right? There's a giant file at FDA with your name on it, and it never goes away.
Well, and I'll tell you, one other thing that I think not everyone's aware of, but that's really noteworthy now, is they have more transparency than they ever did into your inspection history. So they have this tool called the data dashboard that was created for supplier verification, but it's a really incredible tool. You can go on there and look up any food facility and see their inspection history. And they've set it up with like a red, yellow, green light. So even if you have an inspection that didn't go so well and it was in the past, your customers are going to see it, potential investors, whomever it is, and that mark is there. And I more and more work with companies who are being scrutinized and saying, what was that issue that happened back in 2017? Like, oh, that's ancient history. No, but that's on there. What happened? Right. And so you have a lot more external focus too. So again, more reasons to try to prevent it in the first place.
Let's see. So Renee can put the link in the comments. What was the name of that website again?
It's the FDA Data Dashboard.
FDA data.
I think it's called the FSMA Data Dashboard.
FSMA Data Dashboard. Perfect. So a couple of questions here. When Nancy asked, when having a positive pathogen swab in your environment, be very diligent about documenting and being able to answer the question. Did the environmental monitoring positive impact a zone 1 or food product? If no, have good rationale and your RA and RCAs written down. Show your thoughts about it. Absolutely. We hear this from FDA all the time, Maile. So when Sharon Maile is going out giving presentations at conferences and stuff, if you don't document it,
it didn't happen.
Right? And the way I'm looking at documentation for the food industry, I worked in medical device for a couple of years when I got out of college. We're headed in that direction. Right? So FDA likes that process of how the validations are done and the deviation reports and all this methodology. We already see it in like low acid canned foods and things like that. That's the way it's going. We see little hints because FDA will say things like, if you have a blank on a form that's not filled out, that means you didn't do it, right? Even things like, so we've come across this, Maile and I have looked at this before. If you're doing your hazard analysis and you're looking at your microbiological, chemical, and physical risks, and there's no physical risks, let's say, and you leave that blank, FDA says, well, why is this blank? Oh, that means there was no risk. Well, then why doesn't it say no risk? It's blank. Right. Yeah. So that's the level they're getting down to now.
Yeah. And to Nancy's point about, environmental positives, of course, FDA is going to come in as the first thing they're going to look at, right? Your EMP history, what your positives are, what your root cause and corrective actions are, but you can't stop there. They also are stopping to think about, did you then say, could this happen in other places in the facility? Mm-hmm. Were you trending whether this happened 4 different times over the course of the year, or were you just dealing with them isolated incidents? Or do you have heat maps where you're looking at these things uniformly? So it's not just like a one and done. They're very much looking at not just your corrective actions, but your preventive actions. And I think that's a good example of sort of how FSMA enforcement has escalated. So when we first had the rules, everyone I think heard the mantra, educate while we regulate. You essentially kind of got like a soft-ish pass the first time if you didn't have major problems. They sort of let you learn, but that is so long over. And this is a good example of it there, because they're looking for what you're doing preventively. And I'll just add on just something else I'm seeing in this space. because they haven't really inspected that much in the last 2 years. They have in like for cause situations, but not the routine. That so many people have this false sense of like, we're good. Like FDA hasn't been in, like they must not be focused on us. Like, but they've resumed. And what we've seen is they're quickly going to the people who are overdue for re-inspections, but everybody else, they're fast and furious. And also they've had huge turnover on the staff level in terms of the number of new inspectors. And so you tend to also see more aggressive enforcement because new inspectors are trying to prove themselves. So it's an aggressive time.
Well, and a lot of times too with the new inspectors, generally what I found, Maile, is new investigators with FDA kind of break into two categories. The first category is, hey, I'm pretty new at this, right? So I'm learning. So please bear with me as I have to call corporate and figure these things out. And there's the other side, which is, oh, well, here, according to this manual here, I got to shut you down. It's like, whoa, hold on a minute, right? So definitely you want that first group. And this is always a good opportunity then too, to make sure and position this as a collaboration and not an investigation, right? You want to show FDA, to your point earlier, the trust issue. You want to show them that you have good programs and that you're happy to show these and work with them so that they can understand why you do things the way you do.
You just hit on something else that's really important to, I think, just reinforce the significance of an inspection. They don't call them inspections, they call them investigations. They don't call them inspectors, they're called investigators. And so I totally agree with you in working with them collaboratively. Like, what can we show you? How can we help you? We want you to understand our programs, but they're not your friends. They're not your third-party auditor helping you get in compliance. They are investigating. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. And so part of what I would always train my quality managers when I ran companies is that, you need to be collaborative, but you have limits, right? There's things that you can and cannot do. And the FDA investigator is exactly the same, right? There's things that they can do and cannot do. If they're doing a GMP audit versus a food safety audit, they have different protocols that they're following and things like this. And if they have questions, right, they have limits and they need to call into the district office and get clarification and things like that. You're the same, right? FDA does not expect you to have the answer to every question at your fingertips. Right? So if let's go back to the no photography, and FDA says, well, we want to take pictures, right? You need to let us do that, right? Well, hey, as a quality manager, I'm like, well, that's above my pay grade, right? I just follow the company policies. Let's talk with, I don't know, our company food safety lawyer, and we'll discuss your request and see what we can do for you, right? You're the intermediary in a lot of these positions. You don't want to take the adversarial approach ever with FDA. It doesn't do any good, because then, to your point, Maile, it's that trust issue. The more you act like you're hiding something, the more they're going to dig. And you could be completely innocent, but that's the perception that you're giving FDA.
Yeah, you definitely having that good friendly relationship is just important, because it's no different than working with anybody. You go to a sales clerk. If you're a jerk to them, are they going to help you and go in the back to find the inventory? No. No, it's just in life. Like the nicer you are, the more it comes back to you. But it's not that you're going to get favorable treatment. Look, if you've got Listeria on zone 1 surfaces that they're finding, like that, it's not going to help you. But boy, it's nice to, have a friendly rapport with them. One thing you hear a lot, we're focusing on FDA today, but FSIS for meat and poultry products is different because you have an inspector in your facility all the time. And I hear so many examples about how that personal relationship with the inspector makes such a difference as to how difficult they want to make your life or not. And again, this is not in any way saying when they come in the facility, let me give you this bag of cash. No. This is just, but like be friendly and like try to maintain a good rapport and help them get what they want, because it makes it better for everybody.
Yeah, a good mindset for that is we're both on the side of food safety and protecting the public.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. So Austin had a question here for you. Can a food lawyer play a role in improving food safety offenses as opposed to only playing defense? Great question.
Yeah, I like to think so. And I always say, I've gone through and worked on all of the various FSPCA trainings. I helped in the background to develop some of them and to train the trainer and stuff, but everyone's been through those at this point. I don't have a degree in food science, but I've worked with a lot of companies in a lot of space, and especially seen on the FDA side where the enforcement is. Mm-hmm. So there are certain things that we see that the agency wants and understand where they're coming from, where we can help you in terms of improving your programs up front. So I can generally spend just a little bit of time looking at a food safety plan and find the big red flags that FDA is going to zero in on, the things that are going to confuse them, the aspects of programs that we see the most robust, programs including that are missing there. And the nice thing is, as a food lawyer, I work with a really wide range of food companies, people who make food on one countertop, batch by hand, all the way through some of the biggest companies that you have in the grocery store. And there's no one right way to do it. So we have a lot of thoughts and strategies. But I always say, you need to work with your team substantively. I'm not telling you exactly how to write your procedure, but these are the areas where you have risk. And when you see, for example, a new company coming to you and they're making a seasoning blend and they don't have a sanitation preventive control in place, that's something where FDA is going to quickly zero in. And it's also a food safety issue.
Yeah.
If they don't. So that I do think that we can add value there, both in terms of protecting with FDA proactively, defensively, but also I do like to think that there are times when I've looked at programs and it does make a difference for food safety. Processing a product that's a low moisture food on wood, I've just done it enough times to say maybe that's not the best idea. So yeah.
No, definitely. I think that gets to that offense part. So I think too, right? So 2 comments on that too, is part of being more proactive, to Austin's point, is FDA has district offices around the country, right? And they are responsible, not how it used to be. It used to be by location, whoever was closest, so if you're a food company, you may get an investigator with a background in pharma, right? Who doesn't really understand food. So they changed that model around, which I think is a good thing. And they said, no, we need food investigators auditing food companies, right? So they've got that nice background. The point is, where's your district office? Who's the director? Call them, right? Get to know them. They're people, right? It's hey, I just wanted to make sure that this is the correct number to get a hold of you guys if there's something we need or things like that, right? It's just like we're talking about here with Maile. The time to build the relationship and that understanding of who you are is not during the crisis. It's before the crisis.
Yeah, and it's understanding their role too, right? That they're not your consultant.
Right.
I've had people say, can we send them our validation study and see what they think? Nope. But I have seen companies go to the agency and proactively say to people in the district office, hey, we have 3 facilities in your district. We just want to know you to know who we are, what we do. I've also seen companies even offer to help FDA come in voluntarily and tour the site just to understand the nature of their product. That's sort of a different thing, but they're not always your adversary. You've got to think about that too. There's a lot of, we always focus on the enforcement side of FDA, but there's a lot there too that you can work with them on relationship wise proactively. It's not going to help you again if you have listeria in your food, but maybe it will, because you've talked to them before. They know that you're proactive and trustworthy, committed to food safety, and at least they know you're on their team.
Exactly. So Bryan Ravitch, who definitely has a lot of authority relative to FDA. Remember the investigator, the eyes and ears for the decision makers, division compliance officers, and the personnel at headquarters. Absolutely. Right. So FDA, I think, has done a good job of putting together that escalation process. And I was in a meeting back with iFish when things were really starting to get rolling, and the district director in the meeting said, hey, listen, we're learning the correct way to enforce these regulations too. So if you think that an investigator in the field is going way off in a direction that doesn't make sense, call me. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. I love that, right? We're all in this together. We're all learning this. People are people, right? We talk about this all the time on the auditing side with GFSI and things like this. Auditor calibration. FDA investigators are people too, and they're figuring all this stuff out. So the more we can work together on that, the better off we are.
That's true. I had one situation, and this is I'm not saying this to promise this in the future, but someone got a 43 on something that was just an incorrect reading of the regulations. And we were able to, work with people who we had relationships with on the inspection side just to have a second set of eyes on it. And they were like, yep, it was, a new inspector, and they addressed it. So yeah, everyone's learning together. Good point.
Absolutely.
Bryan, good to see you.
Yeah, all of this has been a great context of what we're talking about on this call, which is we've been through this weird 2-year program, right, where FDA really hasn't been coming in. And getting back to what we need to be doing. So I think that's a good way to kind of begin that side of the conversation, Maile, is coming out of this. If I'm a quality food safety manager in a production facility, what should I be tackling first now that things are getting back to normal?
Yeah, so I think I always focus on where problems have occurred.
Mhm.
And where we see problems happening in particular in the last couple of years are with personnel who aren't adequately trained and aren't doing what they're trained to do.
Mm.
So the first thing I'd focus on, especially if I was like a new plant manager or otherwise, is making sure my foundation was strong. And everyone has seen huge issues with employees in terms of morale due to COVID, turnover. Great resignation is not limited to any specific field. And I think as a result, we've certainly seen more and more issues where employees are just making mistakes or not completing their tasks, and like not substantively reviewing the documents and just signing off on them.
Yeah.
So there've been a lot of undeclared allergen recalls that are really the employee wasn't putting the right bags on the line. They weren't doing the checks. And oftentimes, like, the programs are there, they have the preventive control, but they're just not being executed.
Yeah.
So I think you can never spend too much time on your people, on reinforcing training. And so much of this ties in with that sort of nebulous concept of food safety culture that we've been hearing about so much from FDA. Frank Giannis is absolutely so committed to this and has seen firsthand. I mean, look, as someone who works with a whole lot of companies, it's intangible and I certainly can't rank, but I can definitely, it when you see it. And putting time and effort into people goes a long way in terms of food safety and also distilling that good culture.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that, yeah, this is something I'd be interested on your take on this, right? So food companies on the FDA side, oh, okay, yeah, I need a food safety plan, FSMA, yeah, got it. I'm a PCQI, we're all good. I always like to ask them, what about your QIs, your qualified individuals? How are you training them? Because that's in there and people miss that a lot. And so to your example, Maile, if you have allergens in your plant, it's going to be a preventive control, right? So this is something the FDA is going to be looking at really closely. How do you manage your labels? How do you clean? How do you know the allergens are removed between production runs, blah, blah, blah. And your qualified individual in the regs is the person on the floor executing against those food safety requirements. So their training needs to be buttoned up, right? It's like, yep, they're trained on how to manage the metal detector. They're trained on how to do the checks. They do the kickoff mechanism every hour. Here's how we make sure and go back and audit against that. Here's how the PCQI signs off against it, right? You need this whole hierarchy of documentation, and it all starts with that qualified individual.
Yeah, and to that point, helping people understand the why goes such a long way. Why does it matter if I really need to do a double check for the bag I'm putting on the line? Because that 8-year-old boy could eat the wrong bag of this food and have an adverse reaction at school, and they might not have an EpiPen there. That's why.
Yeah.
Why does it matter if I actually make sure that we have appropriately weighed and measured the minerals that go into this animal feed? What does it really matter if I'm X pounds off? Yes, because you could kill an entire flock of whatever has this as their sole source of nutrition. And the studies have showed that when people understand the why behind their jobs, they're more committed to doing them well.
100%, right? So Austin posted a paper in here. Thank you, Austin. Research was focused on local health inspectors and their research was mostly it translates over on the behavior side of things. Comment here from an anonymous user. Training historically been an issue during inspections from my experience, coupled with dry labbing. The why is essential to understand. Absolutely, right? In kind of the anecdotal case I do on this, Maile, is in every food production facility, there's somebody who gives the tours. And it doesn't matter what department they're in, they could be from anywhere, but they're the people who give the color behind the facility, right? And they're just amazing. You go along on the tour with them and they're like, oh, we're so happy you're here. I've worked at this plant for 20 years. We make the most amazing product. Oh, I can't wait to taste the product at the end of the tour with you. Let me walk you through things. And they show you where the buildings have changed. Then they'll talk with the other employees and wave at them. And you come out of that tour going, oh my God, that's amazing. These guys are awesome. Versus me, if I was to give a tour, right, it would be like, okay, this is the receiving bay. Milk comes in. We check the pH, the TA. People are going, right.
But it's funny you say that because I've had tours where it starts off as a like bright and shiny one, and then someone, perhaps like the in-house lawyer, turns to the person and say, no, she's our lawyer. you can talk to her about what's really going on here. And the total tone, changes. And they're like, well, actually, this piece of equipment breaks down like every other week. And so here's this weird fix. And you start to actually see behind the veil.
Exactly, right. And I think that's a good example of it's the why you do things is just as important as the how. And the example I use on this is if I'm a district director at FDA and I'm putting together my plan for inspections and things like this over the quarter, I'm looking at my hit list and I'm saying, okay, who are the people who have recalls? Who are the people making ready to eat food? What are the industries that I'm worried about? That I'm going to go send my guys out to go visit those guys first. If I have some resources left over, I'll get to more of the routine things and I'll save a little bit of that inventory in case a crisis happens. So I've got people that can jump on it right away. It's the same with us, right? So if I am a quality manager and I'm looking at supplier verification, it's not all the same, right? There are high risk ingredients that I buy and there's low risk ingredients that I buy. Am I going to look at the post pasteurization ingredients more closely? Oh God, yeah. Then the salt. I'm going to gather basic documentation and approve the supplier, but man, I'm paying really close attention to the post pasteurization stuff. FDA is the same. So when you're talking through your hazard analysis with FDA and why you chose to visit one supplier versus another, explain it, right? Just shoving a document in front of them and saying, okay, read through this and you'll understand our program. No, just like the tour, you need to give the color behind why you do what you do, just not the how.
Yeah, that's a good point. I see some companies managing inspections entirely like in a decentralized approach, where it's just the plant managers in charge, roll with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I see some companies, the far end of the spectrum, that set up a war room where they have a sort of live stream and there's corporate support giving. I've seen sort of like a live chat where they're all going and sort of feeding advice, but don't throw your plant personnel under the bus, especially on corporate run programs.
Oh yeah.
Like they're not the ones who should be explaining the details of your supply chain program. Like they're just focused on, upon receiving, is it approved?
Mm-hmm.
And what do they need to check? So that idea of like the support structure and planning for inspections can go such a long way. Yeah. And like having good inspection manual, doing mock inspections, all those kinds of things can really make a difference.
And that's a good point too.
So mock recalls, right, are something that you see as a requirement under the third party audit schemes. Like mock inspections, no. Why? It should be.
Right. That's an excellent point. That's one of the things I emphasize with my clients. Testing your crisis management systems is not a mock recall. That's a small subcomponent, right? In reality, you need to do the whole thing and say, okay, as a company, we're going to do this exercise. And how do we communicate? And to your point, these are those subtle strategies that a food lawyer can help you walk through. Because let's say that you're a company that says, okay, we're gonna have a corporate war room and everybody's going to be on that for the entire visit for the FDA investigation, and we're going to be available to answer all their questions immediately. Well, that may not be the right strategy, right? You may want a little bit of separation so that when FDA asks a question of the quality manager says, oh, well, that's a great question. I don't have that answer, but I know who can find that for us. So let me get that to corporate and we'll get back to you tomorrow morning. Is that okay? Right. So then that allows you to review what you have, look at the mechanisms, get an understanding of how you want to present this information, who's going to present this information, so that you're not constantly under the barrel. Because a lot of this too, right, is FDA may be changing course depending on what they're noticing, right? So the FDA investigator goes to the locker room and it's like, uh-oh, and finds something he doesn't like, right? Now all of a sudden, phew, it's going in a completely different direction. You need to account for those things and how are you going to manage those? Because like I said at the beginning, it's not going to go the way you expect. So you need to have a mechanism in place that is flexible enough and allows enough distance to be able to evaluate and decide how to respond.
That just made me think of one other thing companies sometimes don't do the right way that I just want to sort of get out there for your audience. Oftentimes I see people scared of letting FDA know that they're working with a lawyer or a food lawyer. And they'll say, we don't want you on the call with FDA. We don't want to tell them that we're working with you. We don't want your name on the 40, whatever it is, because we don't want them to think that we think that we're in trouble or that we can't handle this on our own or that whatever it is. And that's just not the way it works. It's not a demerit. You're working with legal counsel. Actually, to the contrary, it sort of plays to your advantage that they know that you're taking things seriously and you're getting good counsel. And I hate to sort of share this, but I will. But look, I can't get anybody out of a pickle they've gotten themselves in. I can just help them navigate through it sort of effectively. But I've been in meetings with FDA and they say, we know you're taking this seriously because you're working with, so don't be scared to ask for help or even to show that you're getting help. In the same vein, like, don't leave your plant manager to write the 483 response on their own. If you've already submitted that, like, it goes, a 483 response is a legal document that you're writing. So it kind of goes along with what you're saying, like having a plan on how to do that and not being scared, I just think is really important. I think people so often are just like, but they'll think we can't handle this. It takes a team. It's no different, to your point, sort of circling back in the beginning with kids. It takes a village. And the same thing's true for food safety.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of like what I say in my consulting business is if you're a new quality manager, why reinvent the wheel? Why not work with somebody who's been doing this for 20 or 30 years and has learned all the mistakes and probably done them all? I know I have. And can say, okay, here's how you want to set this up. Here's why you don't want to do it this way, because I learned this the hard way. So work on this and this, and let me help you with that, right? You can shortcut a lot of grief and a lot of work on your own by doing that. So don't think that you have to take it all on your own. And that's part of why we do this chat is food safety is information that benefits us all. I want safe food. Maile wants safe food. We all want safe food, right? Our responsibility and the morality of what we do goes beyond a particular company, right? We're an industry and we're looking at this holistically. And you need to be able to kind of think about that and back up from that and look at that perspective as well. And outside resources like food lawyers and things like this are an amazing way to help you get that perspective. And let's see, so Bryan had a follow-up comment here. Choose a couple dates and pull all monitoring records and review. It's always a good way to see implementation of your program. This is how FDA will determine compliance. Oh, 100%, right? Yeah. And this gets back to our topic for this, right? Is we've been lulled in some ways into a false sense of security over the last 2 years. You need to get back to the basics, right? Is my training correct? Are we following GMPs? Are we doing our line checks correctly? To Bryan's point, which is 100% correct. Let's pull some records and let's look at how we're managing our preventive controls. Are we signing off on the metal detector logs? Are our allergen checks being done at receiving? These type of things, and looking at that, because you want to find these things before FDA does.
Yeah, the thing that frustrates me the most lately is someone has a food safety problem. They go back and say, well, our records all show that everything's fine, because people are signing off on records without actually making sure that the work is done correctly. They're just filling out the records for the sake of the records. And that's something that review your records isn't going to catch. And that goes back to your point about training and culture. So.
Yep. So I always train my clients that there's 3 buckets of information in a production facility. There's operational data. There's the pounds per man hour, the labor used, electricity consumed, all of these type of things that the plant manager needs to know to run the business, to keep the doors open. That's great and it's needed, but it's not what we're focused on and what we do. For quality, we have quality data and food safety data. So the difference between those. So quality data would be weight checks, or making sure that the products are looking nice and pretty in the box, or whatever, right? It's not impacting food safety. Food safety, of course, is food safety. So that's your metal detector checks, your allergen checks, those things that we have identified in the food safety plan. What's FDA going to look at first? Your food safety checks, right? So my recommendation has always been have a file for each production day and keep the food safety records in that file. So when FDA comes in, whoop, you can pull those. And guess what? As the PCQI, you need to be signing off on those, right? So if you've identified metal detection, the preventive control, the PCQI has to review those records and do it within 5 business days, right, of production.
Within a week, yeah.
Yeah, within a week. And if you don't, that's a big oops, right? And I see a lot of companies, Maile, I'd be curious to your perspective on this, that don't understand that yet.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of a lot of this ties back to staffing shortages. Well, those records haven't been reviewed because we don't have people here to do it, or we fell behind. And there is some flexibility in the regs. It's not flexibility though for we don't have people, we're too busy. And the purpose of those reviews, what if you find a problem and the food's already out the door?
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. And if it's a preventive control and it hasn't been reviewed, well, you're probably going to have to document that through a corrective action. So definitely you need to go back and really focus on those basics of, okay, what's my plan saying? What are my GMPs? How am I managing these? And back to your point earlier, the training piece of it, right? Super important. Another big thing, Maile, that people are really seeing out here now is supply chain. Right. And I know I have clients that are impacted by this. They purchase sunflower oil. Well, guess where sunflower oil comes from? Ukraine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, supply chain, everybody knows about this just, inherently as consumers and the like, but a couple things just to be aware of besides the obvious of like cost pressures and supply availability, just to think about from a food safety perspective. First, if you're switching suppliers, there's a little bit of flexibility under the regulations in terms of what you do to verify, but make sure that the ingredient you're getting, you're checking for things like, does it have a different allergen profile? And does it have impacts for your other operations if you're changing suppliers? And this isn't just about like checking the box in terms of subpart G for preventive controls, but it can have a material effect on food safety. It can affect your labeling and claims also. But I'm most focused for this on things like the allergens and food safety profile. And if you're going to switch to a new supplier quickly, like if it's a microsensitive ingredient, things like that, it really is important to make sure that you're not introducing an unexpected risk. The other area where people should really be paying attention right now is economically motivated adulteration.
Oh, yeah.
We're totally ripe for a big problem in this space because there are such shortages. Costs have gone up so quickly. And this is historically sort of exactly the kind of environment when some of the big problems in the past have happened. And it's a combination of sort of, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. If there's an ingredient like sunflower oil that you can't source effectively or cost effectively, and suddenly someone has a whole lot of it. And but I've seen mention of other ingredients recently too, and just general awareness. You need to think about what the risks are. And remember, this is something that's required under the regs when there's a tie to potential food safety hazard. So it actually is an obligation there. So those are just a couple of things that we're watching and keeping an eye on. I'm sort of thinking in the back of my mind about how this is going to end up on YouTube, and we're going to look back in 6 months and there's going to have been a food safety EMA issue. And here we were looking in a crystal ball. It's not that I'm so prescient. It's just that it's exactly when these things, unfortunately, are very likely.
Yep. If criminals see an area where they think they can make a buck, they're going to do it. Yeah. They're going to do it. So, and especially when you're dealing with like oils and ground up spices and things like this, right? There's a strong likelihood, right? There's an opportunity at some point in that supply chain where somebody can go, you know what? I'm going to add in a little bit something extra, right? Let this go a little further, right? You need to be prepared for that. So definitely look at that. Part of this then too is, all right, so you can't find that particular oil. Now the R&D guys have got to reformulate really quick. So now to your point, Maile, they're removing that oil and they're adding other ingredients. Okay, now those need to be approved. You need to update that information too. So all of this, and a good rule for any company that is under FDA regulation, well, this applies for FSIs or anything else too. It's just good practice, is make the rule that if anything changes in the plant, the food safety team has to review it. Right? If you're adding equipment, if you're changing formulas, all of these type of things, make that food safety team your core review of that process to say, oh, we have to reformulate. Okay, well, great. R&D, can you please send over the formula, the new approved supplier list, all that information so we can review it and make sure our food safety plan reflects that.
Yeah, it's astounding how many times I've heard, well, we swapped out that ingredient, but corporate wasn't aware, or whatever it is, and that communication is absolutely essential.
Oh yeah, many a time I've walked through one of my plants and I'm like, I don't remember that piece of equipment. Oh yeah, we bought that a few months ago. Great. Did you update your food safety plan? We're working on it.
Or like, did you do anything to make sure that the equipment was appropriately cleaned and sanitized before you used it? Like, because I've had situations, for example, where a pathogen was found that through the whole genome sequencing was linked to the type of facility that the equipment was used in previously.
Oh,
People haven't appropriately introduced equipment into the facility. There's so much to think about there. Again, a team mentality goes a long way. Yeah, that's why it's called a food safety team, right?
Exactly. Because the people generally who are writing the check for that piece of equipment are thinking of in terms of operation. All right, is this going to be the right speed? Is it going to operate in our plant? Do we have the right footprint for it? Nobody's raising their hand and saying, how do we clean this?
But look, I mean, that's the challenge that we're in, and this is why it's such a hard time. Like, because can you even get equipment? Can you get people to install it? Can you have the right people operate it? And we've got shelf shortages. Things are going out the door. Consumer demand is off the charts. All of this combined, I can imagine someone sitting here listening, like, you're just telling me to do more, more, more. I can barely do what I already need to do. And that's a challenge. Is like, food is a highly regulated industry and space, and we eat all day, every day, and I think take for granted how much has to go into actually making things safe and how little can go wrong to have a huge, huge problem.
Yep, absolutely. That's one of the things, unfortunately, what we do in quality assurance and food safety and food law as well, is that if we're good at our job and we do it well, it appears that it happened by itself, right? Because everything's running fantastically, right? We're making great product. Food safety is wonderful. That takes a ton of work to make that happen. So make sure the organization understands that. So part of, I think we'll bring this back up to the 30,000 foot level. When Maile and I were prepping for this, we were like, all right, what's the key message we need to get out to the audience this week? Really, it's coming out of COVID. It's time to get back to the basics, right? Go and look at your training, revamp your GMPs. Is your environmental program okay? Go and look at all of these type of things, right? It's kind of that normal, and this is natural in production facilities, right? You have, let's say, an SQF audit or something like this, and you get ready for it. And there's always a bit of that letdown afterwards. Everybody's like, shoo, okay, we got through that, right? Let's get the corrective actions in place and move forward. That's been going on for 2 years, right? So let's say you're a new quality manager and you just started a year ago. You think this is normal. It is not, right? You need to be prepared for what's coming. So get with your team, start looking at this, and don't think you have to do it all by yourself. Use external sources for that as well.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's I think the message of shoring up the foundation is just be prepared, because there are so many risks in the current environment that you need to be aware of, and doing some work up front can save you so much on the back end. We've seen, you and I both seen it time and time again. And so I guess we're both kind of here in a way, sort of trying to tell folks who are participating, like, don't make some of the mistakes that we've seen made. And there's a lot that you can do with really, like, not a massive investment of time and effort that can save you. The problem is, of course, like, then you don't know what would have happened otherwise. You have to take us for our word at it. But yeah.
Yep, definitely.
If this prevents you from calling me on Christmas Eve with a food safety crisis like I had this year, let's all put in that time and effort.
Why is that, right? Yeah, I had a crisis happen on a Friday, December 23rd at 4 p.m. Right, everybody's on vacation. I'm there by myself, going, "Oh my god!" Right.
Well, so with that fail, I mean, we started by talking about the weather, right?
Yeah.
I'll disclose here on YouTube to everybody, it's gorgeous in DC. I'm going for my long run this afternoon. I'm going to sign off early and go for my run. But wait, it's Friday afternoon. Food safety folks don't get to do that. My phone is going to ring at 3:30.
100%.
I'm going to end up sitting in front of the laptop in my running clothes dealing with the food safety crisis. It's always on Fridays.
Yeah, absolutely. And so to kind of close out as well, too, I wanted to also thank my sponsor for this live stream, EAS Consulting. So also in the DC, Virginia area, an amazing stable of individuals who are at that company. I work with them to be able to go out and help on issues. And with EAS, they have a fantastic training program. So if you go to easconsultinggroup.com/training, you can check out their training programs. And if you use the code Bryan with a Y, Bryan, you'll get an extra 15% off at checkout. So great deal. You get.
And I'll also say we're so thrilled to have that as a resource, because someone asked earlier, like, can you substantively advise on food safety? To a point, but having that incredible roster of former, FDA people and true specialists, it's important. We partner with EAS regularly, and it's essential to have that partnership to provide that combination of substantive and legal advice.
Yeah, I think the average age of, or the average age, the amount of experience for consultants at EAS is over 25 years. So people with gray hair like me who've been through it. So with that, once again, one of the things I like to say here on when we close out our food safety chats is thank you. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here live. Thank you for your commitment to food safety. This is a team effort and we're all in this together. We may work for different companies, but we're all reaching that same objective, and we're all consumers, right? We understand when we go to the supermarket that we want safe food, right? So there's people behind everything in that supermarket making that happen, just like you. So be proud of what you do, continue growing and learning, and use those resources externally. We love to answer questions. My email is on here. The .com is cut off on the end. Maile's is there as well. If there's something specific you need some help with, or questions you may have that aren't appropriate for this forum, email us, right? We're here to help. So again, Maile, thank you for joining us. It's been too long, and I'm so glad to catch up with you.
This has really been fun. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you bet. So everybody, we will see you back here next Friday on Arbor Day, right? This is Earth Day. I forgot today's Earth Day. So next Friday at the same time. So live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern. And we'll catch you again for the next food safety chat. So everybody enjoy your weekend. It's going to be a fantastic one here in Colorado as well. So we'll see you then. So thanks again, Maile, and enjoy your weekend.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.